Hey, good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us for episode number 29 of Unsung Heroes of the Cloud, where we're hosting Shannon Kuehn and talking all about workload identities. First of all, I want to say a get better soon to Mike. And while I've said get better soon to Mike, Shannon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you on here. And before we dive into workload identities, let's focus on your identity. What do you like to do?
Ah, sure. So, in I guess my personal life, I do a lot of interesting things, right? So, I got started into tech because I'm a DJ, so I love music. I still DJ, but not the way
Oh,
that I did when I was younger. So, I was an underground house DJ and spent a lot of time going to clubs and parties and raves and promoting myself over the years. It was a fun journey to get to this point, but I just don't have the ability to stay up late anymore, which is sad to say, right? You get older, it's hard to stay up late, right? So,
yeah.
so music's a big part of my life. When I am not working, I love to go check out things in the city where I live. So I live in Chicago. Lots of great things going on, food exploration, right? Art. A lot of different exhibits show up here. A lot of things that wouldn't necessarily go to other parts of America because it's such a big city. And then outside of it, just trying to enjoy life the best I can, right? It's kind of a weirder time. We're sort of post the pandemic, but sort of still kind of in the pandemic. It's this weird question mark. So, just trying to make the best of the time that I've got, trying to control what I'm able to control, because I think we all kind of felt like we had no control in 2020, and things have
Hmm.
gotten marginally better. And I think that'll kind of continue as the rest of the remainder of this decade. Hopefully, we're better by 2030, right? But it's one of those things where, just trying to find joy in the things that I wind up, doing in my personal life. And then earlier this year, my wife and I, we adopted. So we've had a very busy year chasing around a little rugrat. So he just turned 9 months last Thursday. So our time has been a lot different this year because we're chasing a little guy around the house.
Oh my God, that is phenomenal.
Yeah, he's been a fun little addition, and he's got a really hilarious personality already. Like, he finds himself excited about funny things, like he'll make noises and he'll just start laughing, and I'm like, "Oh, this kid's going to be a funny kid when he gets older." So,
Well, yeah, it sounds phenomenal. And how's that interfering with your sleep?
I will say this much. He's a great sleeper at night. So I
Yeah.
have been getting the same amount of sleep I normally get from about the age of 3 months on. So the last 6 months or so have been pretty decent related to sleep. The thing that sucks is he does not like to take naps. He has massive FOMO, or fear of missing out. So he will try everything in his power to stay awake, including laughing, kicking, yelling, kind of like shaking around, just trying to show he's not tired, but then he's rubbing his eyes. So we know he's tired.
Yes. Sounds like me on a Friday night.
Right. Me too, let's be honest. And so we always joke that at some point it's going to be fun to tell him, especially when he gets older and he wants to take naps. You used to fight this when you were a kid. You just refused to take a nap when you were
Yeah.
younger.
Yeah, I understand. But let's dive into tech now.
Sure.
When I asked you to come on the show, you were super excited about workload
I
identities,
was.
and I have to say I was equally as excited because I'm so happy that it's finally here and almost ready to go prime.
Correct. Yes. And it's one of those things where, as things have evolved, people have focused less on user identities and these things called service principals or application IDs or managed identities, right? That's become a massive well, it's been a good thing and a bad thing simultaneously. But the bad thing is mostly because people didn't have a great awareness of how much they had, right? And there's been a sprawl of service principles, sprawl of managed identities, and there was no graceful way to kind of wrap your hands around it. And what we're seeing now is we have those features and they are in public preview getting ready to reach general availability.
Yeah. And so, what's workload identity all about?
So if you think about it, people get a little stuck. They're like, okay, I've got an application registration or an application ID. I've got a service principal and I've got a managed identity, right? And so you say workload identities, people often think, oh gosh, do those go away? No. Think of this as kind of the wrapper around all three. just hit my mic. Hopefully that didn't make a crazy noise. But think of
It
this
was
like a
okay.
wrapper. Yeah, think of this like a wrapper around all three. And it's an awesome reality because we sort of needed a way to lump all three of them together, especially if we give you better security posture around each of those three things in your environment. So, what we had heard from customers is it was hard to figure out how many service principals you had, how to make sure that these service principals were doing the things they were supposed to do and they weren't being hijacked by bad actors, right? So there's ways in which to think about making conditional access work for these identities,
Hmm.
making identity protection work for these identities, and thinking about using the risky reports, right? And thinking about querying new tables for your log analytics queries, right? So there's a lot of nifty things that are coming about. And I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to talk about it just because of the fact I feel like, there's so much happening at once at Microsoft. We just came off of Ignite last week, and there's a lot of great new announcements. The
Hmm.
hard part is kind of keeping those announcements at the forefront, and this is one of those things I think a lot of enterprises are going to be excited about.
Yeah, and I think our audience might be as well. So, do you have anything to show us?
I do. So let's see. Awesome. So let's go into conditional access, right? So now you've got, hang on, let me refresh this again. I don't have the ability to create a policy. Let's do this. I can showcase an existing policy. So in this scenario, it's for all owned service principals. And so now, usually folks would just click on users and groups because that's been the big focal point of conditional access. But you now have the idea to focus on workload identities. This preview will eventually go away, right? But it's something to play
Okay.
around with right now. You can set it for all owned service principals. You can set it for select service principals. The problem is right now there's no graceful way to group. I suspect that will change as time moves forward, right? This is a brand new service, brand new feature, I should say. And you would just search for the service principal. So if you wanted to, make sure this service principal, you just select it and then you would hit save on the policy. Let's go back to leave it where it was.
Hmm.
Notice how it's all cloud apps. The conditions are selected. So you can set the principal risk. So in this principal or in this policy, the high, medium, and low risk were selected. If you only care about high and medium or just high, obviously you have flexibility of choosing what makes the most sense for you. But the cool part is the locations bit. Now, this is not configured inside my demo, but it's as simple as just configuring it and specifying if it's all trusted locations or a selected trusted location. So that's kind of a cool bit so that if you've got a service principal all of a sudden doing something in somewhere nowhere near any of your trusted locations, it could automatically go into a block state. Now,
Okay.
you'd obviously
And
want to take. Oh, go ahead.
when you say locations, I know that for the Microsoft Authenticator for people, it uses GPS coordinates. How
Correct.
do you do that for a service principal?
So it would be more so like trusted location, like a public IP from your
Okay.
all of your offices, right? So
Yeah.
you would fully expect those to be trusted, and you would fully expect your service principals or managed identities to be handled inside of those trusted IP spaces, whether it be an on-premises location or it's your IP-based block inside of the cloud. So that's how you would specify inside of the conditional access, which is cool if you think about it, because that's where some of these breaches have occurred in recent years. Things have gotten more sophisticated. People are realizing they're not using human based identities that can't respond to MFA challenges. So the hackers are getting more excited about trying to exploit those accounts. And this will help you because you'll set it up and you can set it up so it blocks immediately, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, when we start these with customers, we indicate put it on report only just to see what you get because you would hate to have something fall on its face, right? Report only is fantastic if you're kind of crawling. Once you feel like you're running and or I guess you're walking before you're running, right? So once you're
Mhm.
walking slash running, then flip it to on and hit save, and it will do exactly what you're looking to do, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So you can enable this, see what the effect would be, and how many login attempts would be blocked, and then once you're happy that it won't hurt anything in production, you can actually turn it on and have the enhanced security.
Correct, which is awesome. So there's some really nifty things happening here that we didn't have graceful ways of controlling before, and we have, noticed the breaches, we've noticed what customers are saying, and we're now giving customers ways to control and take care of the security posture of these identities that can't respond to an MFA challenge, right?
Yeah. And you mentioned service principals here. Does this apply only to service principals you create or also to managed identities?
It would be either, really. It's up to
Okay.
you on how you want to do it. But if you think about it, a managed identity is just a special service principal where you're not maintaining the secret. So
Yeah.
you could specify a system managed identity or a user managed identity, depending upon what you have, and that would just be something that you would specify inside of the service principal bucket. All right. You could even exclude certain service principles. So if you know
Okay.
that you're going to be experimenting or you introduced a brand new service principle and you're not quite sure 100% of what all it's doing, you could exclude it. So that's an interesting extra component that I wanted to make sure I highlighted as well.
Yeah. That's really nice.
And then if we go down here to conditional access again, you can take a look at the insights and reporting blade. So before you would just see the user sign-ins, notice how there's the service principal sign-ins. And this is that awesome workbook that shows up on a lot of Azure resources. It's a great sort of picture moment in time of what's happening in your environment. And it's the same sort of concept. You can start to drill in. You'll get some interesting details about the sign-ins. And my apologies, it's a little blown up at the moment. So I will just kind of showcase what you're able to grab. You'll see the conditional access status. You'll see the correlation ID. So some of this is really helpful if you're trying to investigate alerts in real time. But this is one of those things where, it's sort of built into the insights and reporting section within conditional access. And now you can focus on your service principal sign-ins, which is pretty nifty and neat if you think about it, because prior to, there was no, graceful way of really looking at it, right, from that high level overview. So this is that great entrance into what's happening in your environment.
Yeah. And I see all those logs appear. Can you also funnel those into Azure Sentinel to do more advanced analytics on top of
You
them?
can, you can. So this should take me, yeah. So then you could go into your log analytics workspace, right? And this is where you can start to drill in. You can start to figure out exactly what's happening in your environment. You can experiment with the queries, but it's all sort of integrated on that front. So you would just need to have set that up and have all your logs get funneled into there. And then you could, either expose it through log analytics or expose it through Azure Sentinel, depending upon what makes the most sense for your environment.
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty nifty.
It is pretty nifty. It's kind of a nice thing to see. Let's go down to identity protection. So now we've got risky workload identities, right? And this is where you can see the identity that the anomalies have detected as a risky workload identity. Looks just like your users, except it's a little bit different. So when you go into here, you'll start to see that, in this instance, the service principal is still enabled, but you could set up policies so it becomes disabled. You get the service principal ID, right? Get the app ID. You can go into the sign-ins logs, which is great. Now, I think this might, oh yeah, no, it'll capture all of it. If you wanted to go back into here too, I think this is the one I picked, right? Yeah. So you can go into the audit logs as well. So the sign-ins or the audit logs, depending upon how you needed to investigate. So if you go into here, it's not going to find anything because I think it's the last month. I think some of these specific things were more than a month old. But the cool part about it here is you could go in, you could take a look at the risk detections, you could confirm if the service principal is compromised. So I thought I had configured my rights correctly. I'm still in reader mode, but hopefully you get a feel for what you're able to do. If you've got the right levels of access, you could confirm that the service principal was compromised. That would move it into a blocked state or a disabled state. You could dismiss the service principal risk, or you could just disable the service principal from here. So you've got some flexibility built into here that you normally didn't have prior to. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then if you think about it, you can go into, I believe, hang on, there's one other blade, and I don't know if I have, yeah, I think this is just going to be the blade that we wind up landing on. There's going to be, I think, some extra features that wind up you're able to kind of control from here. But this is helpful in the event that you're trying to triage some sort of weird issue that you're seeing, some sort of event gets tripped, and you want to try and figure out exactly what's happening inside your world. So that's if you think about it, the idea of being able to use conditional access, identity protection, those things are two great tools that we love to talk about quite a bit when it comes to users. And now we have the flexibility of applying it to our workload identities, which is something that we didn't have prior to a couple of months ago, and we're set to get close here to having it reach general availability. So we're excited to see this launch. We're excited to see the service expand. We're excited to see the service continue to mature, because I think there's more things we could do with these workload identities. So, it's something that I always encourage customers to go out and explore, to play around with. Obviously, if anybody's got any questions, they can always reach out to me. They can get a hold of me on Twitter or LinkedIn. We've got ways of being kind of that feedback loop for Microsoft. So, that's one way to think about it. I know I've gotten some folks who are curious about understanding more related to workload identities, and just trying to get more and more folks excited about some of the newer features inside of the identity stack at Microsoft.
Yeah, and I'm pretty excited about this as well. Like, as you think about your applications needing to get access to secure data, you want to make sure that not only people have that multi-factor authentication, but also your service principals. So pretty nifty things.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing this, Shannon.
Oh, sure, sure. Thanks for having me. And I thought it would be a great little segment to do, just because of the fact that your show is kind of a short, kind of casual show, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about it a little bit more in depth and get some exposure to the folks that tune into your show.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, I want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing this segment on workload identities. And for all of those who have tuned in up to this point, we will see you again in about 2 weeks' time. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.